Taiwan's defense minister says this year's Han Kuang military exercises will be the largest in the country's history. The White House suggests its 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs could be extended. Taiwan announces temporary import duties on beer brewed in China, accusing Chinese producers of dumping. Plus, 10 years after a deadly explosion at a water park in Taiwan claimed 15 lives, one survivor of the disaster tells his story. Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yvonne Yang. Taiwan's defense minister says Taiwan's annual military drills, the Han Kuang exercises, will be the largest in the country's history.
本次演习想定设计向前延伸到平时共军灰色地带袭扰，演练呢应变中心指挥所的开设，以应对共军中高强度灰色地带的袭扰。
China has increasingly used gray zone tactics, which are meant to intimidate Taiwan but fall short of acts of war. Taiwan is concerned that those actions could lead to conflict. This year's drills will last 10 days, longer than in previous years, and will include the deployment of new weapons. Chinese diplomats reportedly tailed Taiwan's current vice president during her visit to Prague last year, gathering intel along the way. Czech officials said then VP-elect Bi-khim Hsiao was followed by Chinese officials who were collecting intelligence on her movement and nearly caused a car crash. They were also reportedly planning to confront Hsiao. Taiwan's presidential office has condemned China's actions, and the Taiwanese office responsible for relations with China also has called on Beijing to issue an apology and explanation. A 90-day pause on steep U.S. tariffs on most countries is set to end on July 8th. But the White House says that deadline could now be extended.
Perhaps it could be extended, but that's a decision for the president to make. The deadline is not critical. The president can simply provide these countries with a deal if they refuse to make us one by the deadline.
Levitt says President Trump can set a tariff rate for countries that refuse to make a trade deal with the U.S. A top White House official says he expects the deadlines will be extended for countries that engage in good faith trade negotiations. The Trump administration is currently in talks with several countries to reduce tariffs and strike trade deals. That includes Taiwan, which faces 32% import duties on most of its goods. Chinese beer is rapidly gaining market share in Taiwan, something the government says amounts to dumping. So, in July, it's putting hefty duties on Chinese imports. But as John Ventrias reports, some lawmakers worry the tax's short time frame could actually hurt Taiwanese brewers in the long run.
Q1 this year was a fresh high for Chinese beer in Taiwan. Market share hit 36%, a fourfold jump from a decade before. But some ruling party lawmakers don't see this as an innocent example of competition in action. They've gathered with officials to talk newly announced anti-dumping measures, a 4-month duty on Chinese beers of up to 64% about to take effect. The ruling Democratic Progressive Party is wary of China, and some of its lawmakers say this imported beer could fund Chinese weaponry used against Taiwan. But they also say this is a matter of upholding free and fair trade.
动用国家的预算来进行这个不公平的补贴，我觉得站在国家对国家的高度当中，不能只有产业的态度，还有政府的态度。第二个呢，他们可以来，到目前为止累计起来160亿，我们不能去，到目前为止我们几乎是接近0，这也是相当的不公平啊。
They also say Chinese beers may not be clearly labeled as made in China. They may be well-known brands brewed under license in China, or use labeling suggesting they're Taiwanese brands.
它下面写一个什么美国知名品牌，结果它的产地是芝麻大。
啤酒上面有一个叫做屏东黑尾鱼，屏东这2个字跟这个都跟 这个跟它的啤酒的原产地中国福建没有关系。
These lawmakers don't feel rules issued in April to make the place of origin clear go far enough. There's one more concern. The government started signaling these duties would come months ago. That's given importers plenty of time to stock up and try to wait out the 4-month tariff period, even as the government considers a further response.
它博什么？博在我们台湾政府在12月核定最终的反倾销税之前，我们的国产啤酒已经被打垮了。我们的国产啤酒渡不过今年的夏天，因为夏天市面上充斥着大家6、7月、8月大热天喝的啤酒，都是喝便宜的，冒称是其他国家生产的中国啤酒。
The brewers here today represent large national brands. But even craft brewers not directly competing with commercial brands say the fact that Chinese beer is so much cheaper can bite, because this is a market where the average customer looks at the price and not always the place of origin. Not all brewers blame subsidies. Some say China just has the capacity to brew at a scale Taiwan can't match. But even craft brewer Jay Duan, who isn't against a Chinese beer now and then, feels the government has to do something.
中国制的啤酒，它市占率已经高到这么多的时候，我觉得台湾政府应该是要有一些作为，我是认同，因为毕竟我们在这个行业，很辛苦，那我们真的就是规模不如人，所以我们的价格就是拼不过。
The lawmakers gathered here today want temporary duties to be just a first step. They also want an anti-dumping report from the finance ministry and even stricter labeling requirements so consumers know what they're buying. The temporary duties take effect July 3rd, but these lawmakers suggest the battle of the beer with China may be far from over, with a push for further protectionist measures yet to come. Alex Chen and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
The Labor Ministry has issued new guidelines calling on businesses to better accommodate workers with disabilities. The aim is to create a more inclusive work environment. Irene Ling has more.
Eyes focused, hands steady. This new employee is training to be a test engineer. Being on the autism spectrum, he has received detailed guidance and attention from seniors at the company, which has helped him adapt to his role. Taiwan's Labor Ministry is now trying to spread that model to other businesses. It's been working with disability rights NGOs to create new guidance for companies to ease employees with disabilities into their workplaces.
我们从120万的这个数字来看的话，这个就业工作其实就是让我们很多的障碍者实质能够参与社会，其实最重要的方法之一。
目前有没有看到问题？
The guidance advises employers to provide reasonable accommodation for the workers who are disabled. It's a concept that comes from a United Nations convention aimed at ensuring such employees enjoy basic human rights and freedom while at work. Companies that have welcomed employees with disabilities say they've seen positive outcomes and that their hires have developed their own ways of approaching work tasks.
有一些人他甚至还有办法把一整个产品在生产线一个产品的各部位用它各零件用他身体的部位去记，所以机器在他面前，他扫描一下，他就知道说这个机器哪一个零件有问题。
NGOs who worked on the guidance say they hope disability rights in the workplace can soon be written into law.
呼吁我们希望能够尽速赶快修订我们的身心障碍权益保障法，让合理调整有明确的规范与效力，然后成为身心障碍者工作权利的后盾。
The guidance will come into effect in July. Those involved in its drafting hope it will not only benefit those with legal proof of their disability, but anyone who may need extra help at work. While legal protections for employees with disabilities in Taiwan still have a long way to go, the hope is that this new official advice might open more doors for them. Justin Wu and Irene Lin for TaiwanPlus.
It's been 10 years since tragedy struck at a water park party in New Taipei. 15 people were killed and almost 500 injured in the disaster. Our reporter Sandy Chi meets a survivor to learn how that fateful night changed his life.
For 32-year-old Huan Bo-wei, his life changed dramatically a decade ago. Back then, he was an engineer and basketball enthusiast who enjoyed the speed and excitement on the court. But one night, tragedy struck. On June 27th, 2015, around 1,000 revelers gathered for a color play party at a water park in New Taipei, where colorful powder was sprayed over the crowd. The powder, made of cornstarch, was ignited by the heat of light on the stage in a dust explosion that created a massive fireball. 15 people were killed, and almost 500 others were injured in the deadliest explosion of its kind in Taiwan's history. The events of that horrific night remain engraved in Huang's memory.
那一切来得太快，那一瞬间你会觉得很像做梦，你会有点分不清楚现实跟做梦之间。但是你下一秒，你身体传来那种灼热跟刺痛感，让你意识到说发生了什么事。不过我们身处在那个派对当中的人，我们看不到任何的方向，我们的画面就是很亮很亮一片，你甚至连想要逃跑，你都不知道要往哪一个方向，因为你已经看不清楚。所以我们只能够在火里面逃窜。
Huang was burned on over 90% of his body, leaving him with only a 5% chance of survival. Doctors treating him were torn between continuing aggressive treatment or letting him go. But Huang was determined to fight, even if it meant losing both his arms and legs.
打从一开始他们告诉我说要放弃急救的时候，我一听到的那一瞬间，我就完全不打算选那条路。就是我从一开始的时候，我就觉得我绝对不要轻易的就放弃。那更到医院之后，我更坚定，就是觉得说，我们不知道死后的世界到底是什么。那我不想要再没有努力就这样子轻易的放弃。
Determined to survive, Huang underwent countless rounds of treatment and surgical procedures, including skin grafts and debridement. He even agreed to amputate 3 limbs to save his life. He was in the hospital for over 200 days, but his recovery took another 2 years. Despite the pain he endured, Huang never thought of giving up. Instead, he was determined to show he could still do what able-bodied people can do. He learned how to live on his own, even adopting a cat. And in 2017, he joined an expedition to the top of Mount Hehuan in central Taiwan, 3,400 meters high.
其实登上山顶的那一刻的时候，其实很不真实，因为你会不自觉想到自己可能本来真的是要离开这个世界，但是你又觉得说，哎，现在还可以这样子，很自然而然的呼吸这样的空气，我觉得那是，很不真实的感觉。
The Sunshine Social Welfare Foundation, an organization that specializes in helping burn survivors, is full of praise for Huang's attitude.
我觉得是蛮少看到他有就是特别沮丧或是可能心情不好的时候，我觉得他一直都好像蛮知道自己想要些什么的，他都会跟我们讨论，包含说可能生活上的一些辅具，他有想达到什么事情，就会跟我们去讨论说，那要用什么样的策略去完成。
Huang is one of the most severe burn cases from the water park explosion. The majority of survivors experienced at least 40% burns. It was a devastating night for the casualties and their families, as well as the medical staff who attended them.
这样子的烧伤的大量伤患，那真的是头一次看到。有一些家属当场就赶到了，然后看到他们的家人，有的会很想要放声大哭，我会去抱住他们的头，我会说现在不是哭的时候，我们一定还有哭的时候，但现在把我们哭的力气化作祝福，祝福我们的家人能够平安挺过这一关。
Recovering from burns is a long and painful journey. Even after healing, the injuries can have a significant and lasting impact on mental health, leading to issues including depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Looking back on his recovery journey, it was painful and tough. But that experience helped Huang begin a new chapter filled with hope and accomplishment.
如果跟我自己10年前自己说的话，我会觉得就是很庆幸你没有选择放弃，那你选择截肢活下来。 那现在的生活其实已经比你当时躺在那边想象来过得美好的很多。
Though the scars and memories from that terrible night remain, they are also proof that Huang is not just a burn survivor, but also a fighter who will continue to inspire others with his story. I'm Xuan Zanichi for TaiwanPlus.
The U.S. military is sounding the alarm over China's growing military capabilities. The U.S. Air Force Secretary told a U.S. Senate committee hearing that Beijing has over 900 short-range ballistic missiles aimed at Taiwan. China also has 400 additional missiles capable of hitting the first island chain, which includes Taiwan, Japan, and the Philippines. Meanwhile, the U.S. Space Force expressed concern over China's rapidly evolving, quote, kill web. This term refers to a network of drones, sensors, and other technology that could enable near-instant tracking and strikes on the U.S. and allied forces.
So we're looking forward to delivery of that.
NATO has just wrapped up a two-day summit. The meeting was dominated by alliance members' pledge to raise defense spending to 5% of GDP, a key demand of U.S. President Donald Trump. But it also left questions open about future conflict with Russia and a potential war in the Taiwan Strait. For more on those challenges, Alec McDonald spoke with Keir Giles, a senior consulting fellow at Chatham House.
Keir, this NATO meeting was surrounded by a lot of dramatic headlines, including the Iran-Israel conflict, Donald Trump making his presence well known at NATO. But what is the headline that caught your attention?
It's more what has been left out of the summit that is important. Some of the things that were anticipated have come to pass, like the supposed 5% made up of 3.5% of GDP on defense, plus another 1.5% of associated spending that supports defense. Now, that, of course, is not a particularly meaningful figure because, after all, these targets have been there before and NATO nations have consistently failed to meet them. Plus, Donald Trump has said the US itself is exempt. But it's really just a symptom of the way the real problems with NATO have been pushed under the carpet. This is presented as a success in the same way that keeping Donald Trump and the United States on side is presented as a success. And that speaks to just how dangerous the situation was for NATO. It's being treated as a positive outcome that the alliance didn't fall apart altogether as a result of Donald Trump being put in the same room with the Europeans whose commitment to defense he's been so repeatedly questioning.
So what is it then that NATO needs to really do to close that gap between defense spending and then actual hardening the defense of Europe?
Well, one thing that's been overlooked again in this summit is that NATO has already laid out very clearly what it thinks it needs to deal with all the potential problems that are coming down the track, up to and including a direct challenge from Russia. And that's where the gap in terms of what NATO needs and what it can actually provide really shows up. Each country has a list of things that it is supposed to contribute to the alliance. Very few are actually capable of doing so. And that would be a far more realistic measure of what NATO needs to do now in order to be relevant, rather than a percentage of a fairly arbitrary number, which is based on GDP.
So to ask directly about Donald Trump, he really made his presence known here, commenting that he may not believe Article 5 is entirely binding. There were some very odd comments during the conference. What do you make of his presence there this year?
Everybody's been hanging on Trump's every word to try to get some kind of clue as to what he's thinking. But of course, that's of limited use when what he's thinking seems to change so rapidly from one day to the next. The underlying problem, of course, is that the current United States administration sees itself as a partner with Russia rather than a country that needs to defend itself against Russia. And that, of course, compromises the whole structure of NATO deterrence, which is founded on the United States being there as the guarantor of security. That's what's got Europe so worried. The fact that with the case study, with the stress test of Ukraine, the United States has come down in so many cases on the side of Russia.
So at the beginning of the conference, Mark Rutte said that the Taiwan Strait cannot be seen as a distant issue and that Beijing may call on Russia as a junior partner. I want to get your opinion and analysis on those comments.
Nobody in Europe thinks that the war in Ukraine is a local issue anymore because Russia has already pulled in Asian partners to join in its war. Iran, North Korea, indirectly China, all already involved in this onslaught on Europe. So there is already a global conflict underway, and it's reasonable to assume that if China were interested in taking advantage of the opportunity that's presented by the United States' hesitancy in deterring aggression, then Russia might well be enlisted as a junior partner to create a distraction elsewhere. It is a global problem, and more people, particularly in Europe, are recognizing this.
That was Chatham House Senior Consulting Fellow Keir Giles. Until the end of World War II, both Taiwan and Okinawa had spent over 50 years under Japanese rule. But 80 years on, their memories of the war are worlds apart, shaped by whether they stood on the edge of the conflict or at its very heart. Jeffrey Chen reports.
"80 years after the Battle of Okinawa, the memories of World War II are fading in Taiwan. But on the Japanese island, its scars remain part of daily life, cut into the landscape and people's memories."
Okinawa natives filter through our lines. Although long a part of Tokyo's domain, the Japs treated them as an inferior race. Not at all warlike, they seem grateful for American kindness.
米軍、アメリカ軍をしてありったけの自国を一つにまとめた戦闘と言わせた凄まじい戦場に沖縄県民は放り出されました。
Okinawa was the last and largest land battle fought on Japanese home soil. Japanese troops were ordered to fight to the death, and Okinawan civilians, conscripted as medics, defense workers, even used as human shields, bore the brunt of Japan's final defense tactics.
The Okinawans, an ethnically vague race of Japanese nationals, are by no means antagonistic, but as they number close to 300,000, the security and health of our forces make them a definite military problem in the operation.
Civilians had it the worst of pretty much anybody. You have tens of thousands of Okinawans who are killed in the crossfire, who are killed especially in a lot of cave fighting.
At around 100,000 civilians dead, estimates place the death toll at between a quarter and a third of the island's wartime population. And just across the sea, Taiwan, then still under Japanese rule, watched from afar, spared an invasion, but not the war.
如果当时他们登陆的是台湾，那这些发生在冲绳的这些自杀攻击或者是集体自决、集体自杀的这一些悲剧，那在台湾会用什么样的方式出现？
The sea and airport city of Naha, what was soon to develop into a drawn-out siege, opens with intense bombardment of the approaches to the city.
Taiwan is saved from, unlike Okinawa, from a horrific land battle. Had there been a massive land battle in Taiwan, as there was late in the war on Okinawa, I think we would have seen a very different reaction by Taiwanese.
当時の日本では捕虜になるぐらいだったら自決しろというふうに沖縄の人たちは教わっていました。
Powerful tank flamethrowers blast enemy caves on strategic Sawtooth Ridge near Naha. Newsreel, Signal Corps, and Marine cameramen risk their lives to film the furious action near Sugarloaf, Conical, and Chocolate Drop Hills, and other cave-entrenched Jap positions.
The tradition for many was, of course, to go to their family caves, during times of crisis. Well, those are fighting positions, too. And the Americans can't really distinguish between one or the other, between who is who at times.
Satchel charges are used to blast many of the Japanese defenders from their underground emplacements.
While Okinawa was devastated, Taiwan got through the war comparatively unscathed. On the deadliest day of the war in Taiwan, an American air raid on Taipei killed 3,000. By comparison, the firebombing of Tokyo in March 1945 killed as many as 100,000 people in a single night. Along with human bones and equipment, Okinawans uncover hundreds of pieces of unexploded ordnance each year, compared to just 2 or 3 major finds a year in Taiwan.
また不発弾がまだたくさん地中に残っているので、その不発弾が爆発してしまって亡くなってしまう子供がいたりとか、戦争の後というのがずっと続いていました。
There's also the fact that U.S. forces who landed on Okinawa in April 1945 never truly left. Today, the island hosts 70% of all U.S. military facilities in Japan, a reality that could once again place its people on the front lines in a potential conflict over the Taiwan Strait.
他们就会跟我提到台湾有事这样，那他们就是会表达说，就是不管是用什么样的一个名目，不管是为了什么样的一个名义，他们就会说战争是绝对不可以的这样。
For Okinawans, like many people in mainland Japan, the war was rock bottom. Things began to improve after the empire's defeat. But in Taiwan, it was the post-war years that cast the longest shadow. Food shortages, a new regime, massacres, and decades of martial law.
10岁讲好，咱战到要死也无钱，都爱你讲好了，就迄阵的艰苦，咱骗日本时代搁较艰苦。日本时代你艰苦，日本人也有配食啊米互你。迄阵哦，讲好了，伊佫无头无早，有钱嘛无得食米。
80 years after World War II, Okinawa still hosts the bulk of U.S. forces in Japan, and Taiwan now finds itself at the center of rising tensions with China. For both islands, history is more than memory. It's a reminder that the next conflict could again hit close to home. James Lin, Ed Moon, Bryn Thomas, and Jeffrey Chen for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care, and I'll see you next time.